So thanks for coming in.
Good to hang out
I've
with you,
been
Wes.
really looking forward to this, and I think that one of the best parts is, Bob, is that every time we get together, which is never enough, I think it's a sign of, I don't know if it's a sign of age or what have
Yeah,
you, or having families and stuff. But like every time we get together and talk, I always get so many takeaways that
yeah,
with just your experience and your wisdom, like your unique take on things, and it's never enough time.
yeah.
That's
Me
the
too.
other,
Yeah.
that's the other takeaway. And so I just want to start by getting the story behind the pants because I know you're a man of fashion, as am
Yes.
I.
Yep. I think the only way you can get away with this is if you're in like a weird, like yachting or something. Like if you're selling life insurance, these pants
Yeah,
don't work,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
got
yeah.
to be like a
You got to
very,
be right down the middle.
yeah. This is like and I'm lucky enough to work in an industry that allows this. But the weird thing is, I have like, if you were to go in my closet right now, I have like 4 pairs of pants. That's a good sign. That is a good fucking sign. Um, is it still going? All right. And I have like 4 pants, and they're all like bright. I think I have 1 pair of khakis, and the trick is you have to wear a solid up top,
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
limits, and then it's just like brainless. It's like a uniform. You don't have to think about it, right?
You have to wear solid up top.
Yeah,
Like
you
I
can't
would
like you
think.
can't wear this and wear like crazy, or like it has to be a solid blue or a white. You can't wear this with like a red shirt or anything
Oh
with
yeah,
green in it, right?
I think they call it a color block. But
Yeah, I think you're
but
right.
so is there like a was it just one day you were like I'm gonna wear like
This is a true story. So I don't have much fashion sense at all. Like I'm not like progressive in that way. I get so I don't have fashion sense, and I'm very self conscious of like, for some reason I think what I wear people actually care about, right? So I'll be like, oh, what, I could never wear red pants because they would just think I'm a complete idiot or wannabe or whatever. And one day, and I think it was my uncle, somebody gave me a pair of salmon pants, which is a little safer, and I just, it was in my closet for like a year and a half, and I ran out of stuff to wear, and I wore this salmon that was just hanging there
yeah,
forever,
yeah, yeah.
and I went through the day, and not one person said anything about it, and it occurred to me, nobody cares, really, right? Other than your first question of this
Yeah.
podcast being that, and so it gave me a little more self confidence to be like, oh, this doesn't really matter that much, and it just fits the thing of yachting, you know?
I feel like such a conversation piece. Like,
Yeah,
like every time I see you and you're at like some sort of event or whatever, I'm like,
yeah.
I think Bob's so brave,
So
which is the opposite of how you see it.
so a few years before that, this really introduced that thought for me. Was I had a little bit of like a what am I doing with my life kind of thing, and I essentially gave away everything I owned. Like sold the nice car I had, I got rid of everything in my closet, and I basically wore the same thing every day for a year and a half, which was a pair of jeans and black polo. And the crazy thing about that was it was about 4 months into it where the people in my office and my friends actually said something like, dude, do you own anything else but that? But it took a
It
long
took
time for anybody to notice. And it's
that's
that whole
great.
thing of like, everybody's thinking about themselves. Nobody's really thinking about you unless you're this obnoxious and you wear some crazy
I,
color combo.
that's amazing, and I feel like this is so parallel to me, like playing golf with my friend, like some
Right.
guy friends, and I had like one I haven't seen in a while, and I come home, and she's like, "Hey, how was golf with, Bob? Oh, it's great. It's a great day, beautiful weather. Like, how are Danny and the kids? Like,
Yeah.
we're like pretty good, I guess.
Right.
Like, you didn't you didn't
Right.
talk well. Yeah, he did mention that one of them started school, but oh, really? And like,
Yeah.
are they what? How's school? I don't have any answers for you.
Right.
What do you guys talk about
Right.
for 5 hours?
We talked about the 1986 Mets.
Yeah, we did.
Right.
By the way, we won't get into that today, but so like from a business standpoint, I've always been enamored with business, but not just that, but specifically family business.
Yep.
I don't know if that's just a result of having been a part of a family business myself in Fort Lauderdale, but I think we share some similarities there, and
Yep.
that we had family businesses and that we're third generation in Fort Lauderdale,
Yep.
which is kind of amazing and quite rare these days,
Yep.
right? Like, so I think I read that your grandfather bought his boatyard here in
Right.
1950, and that's the year my dad moved here when he was a baby, and
No
my
way.
granddad established their furniture store on Las Olas Boulevard.
Yep.
So Just would love to hear that story and that journey and how that sort of started and came to where you are today.
Only because I would just love nothing more than to one-up you nonstop.
Yeah,
1948.
please.
So 2 years before your sorry family came here.
Yeah.
My sorry family came here back in, it was weird, January 1948. And you can hear, I don't know if you can actually pick this up on the audio, but it's pouring down rain right now, which is like very much a Fort Lauderdale thing, right? You have these squalls that come
Summer
through.
shower.
In the fall of 1947, two back-to-back hurricanes came through. This was before there was the kind of measuring that we do on hurricanes, but they were for sure known
Pre-Bob
storms,
Soper.
right? That came through, and I think it was one of the only times that a county got hit back-to-back by a hurricane in the same year. And so a lot of people were fleeing this God-forbidden place. There was just like a lot of just bad weather, flooding, mosquitoes. My grandparents came down on their honeymoon and they ran into a guy, last name Dooley, and essentially on their honeymoon, they bought a shipyard from Mr. Dooley, quickly renamed it Broward Marine, and there was a war contract that they picked up for minesweepers, which, do you know what a minesweeper is?
Yeah.
Probably pretty good
Not
idea.
the same Minesweeper that I played on my phone.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Great game. But wood boats that would essentially go out and try to pick up mines to make sure that shipping channels were safe and all that stuff. And then when that part of the business dried up because of the war, not being, just becoming less and less of an issue, they started the yacht manufacturing side of it because they had the people and they had the know-how of how to build a boat, and that's what started Broward Marine as a yacht building company back in 1948.
And so that marina went, and they were building boats all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s through that
Correct,
time?
yeah. So late 40s, 50s. They started building private vessels somewhere in the 60s.
Okay.
Still wood, because that's what the mine suit, wood boats. And then they started building aluminum in the 70s. They opened up a second plant up in Michigan, and they were building at that, I forget the exact dates, I should know this, but somewhere in the mid 70s to the late 90s when my grandfather sold the business, they were responsible for building more large yachts than anybody in the world. And it was very much, I would like to say, one of the reasons that Fort Lauderdale became a major hub for yachting was because there was a lot of activity here on the construction side and then servicing, and a lot of little cottage businesses were birthed out of that, and Fort Lauderdale became the place that you would go to service a boat, service a yacht.
It is interesting to hear that sort of evolution. And I read a study from the Marine Industry Association a few years ago. We've done some work in consulting and in the marine industry. The number of jobs that are tied to the maritime business, marine business in Broward far exceeds Dade and Palm Beach, which shocked me.
Yeah.
Both of them, you would think it would just be one big area, obviously much more accessible than like the west coast of the U.S.
Yep.
But this was like 110,000 jobs in Broward versus 20 in Palm Beach.
And what's even more surprising than that, when you take a look at jobs in the marine industry, is that there's more jobs, marine industry, state of Florida, than there is any other industry outside of tourism. So you remove tourism, the marine boating, yachting space is responsible for creating more jobs in our state than anything, including citrus, including anything. So it's a really neat thing, and I think that's one of the things yachting struggles with a little bit, is it's very much a 1% perceived.
Yeah.
So for us as an industry, it's hard to lobby for stuff. It's to benefit Jeff Bezos? Screw that guy.
Right.
Behind the scenes, though, the amount of jobs that boat during construction creates and then post-construction is just insane.
All right, so you come in, you start DYS, it's 2001. The shipyards, has been sold.
Yep.
What's your mindset then? Are you a young guy just trying to find your way in the business and carve your way out, or do you have big dreams? What take me back then?
Yeah, so I graduated in '99, which was, you would remember with me, just the sort of tech boom part of it, and it just was I felt like I was very much missing out. It just seemed like there was money and jobs and opportunities and businesses and .com things happening, and there was just you just had to stick up your hand and grab and I feel like I was just missing out on all of that. And I ended up working for two awesome guys that were entrepreneurs. And I remember on my second job, I loved what I was doing, but I very much felt like I was missing out on this thing that was happening, and it was just gnawing at me. And around the same time, my parents started to talk to me about jumping into the business, or jumping into the industry, and I was terrified because I didn't know much. I knew nothing about boat building. To this day, I'm a grown-ass man. I don't know how to change my oil. I'm just not mechanically minded. I don't know how to Like my brain doesn't work like that. And so I didn't really have anything there was no justification for me to jump into the industry other than the fact that my last name was known in the industry of yachting, really nowhere else, but like in that
Yeah.
industry. And so it gave me a little bit of credibility. And my parents did a good job they were polite about it, but they definitely, like, there was a nuanced manipulation where they were like, there was the compelling argument of like, third generation, your older brother's not doing it, this is your opportunity, like, why don't you? And so I remember right around that time pivoting from the job that I had and committing to do this. And right around that time was when 9/11 happened, so it was like 2001, and I started full time, I think it was August, maybe late July, and it was just a really scary, terrifying, I don't know what I'm doing, I have a cool last name kind of for this, but I really don't understand much about this. And then, oh yeah, the world's on fire. It was just a really, really scary time, but was able to push through it. And I think one of our early advantages was the fact that we embraced technology and internet marketing and things like that, not because I was a visionary, but I couldn't afford anything else, right? So I couldn't afford a big print ad in the back of Yachting Magazine. It was more of the Google AdWords are $50 a month. I can probably get a few clicks from that and figure the rest out. And that we really built the business on desperate, don't have any other way to market to people except for this thing. And really fortunate for us, it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside looking in, I had always seen you as somebody that initially found footing and traction from bringing technology to an antiquated business, right? And that's, if you listen to a lot of the entrepreneurs these days, or private equity or what have you, like that, there's a lot of that still happening, bringing technology and advancement to antiquated businesses and industries. And I saw you really doing that early on and just like being ahead of that curve. And I felt like that's where you initially got traction. And yacht brokerage, I think, from what I understand, is a little bit like the Wild West in a way. It's not as structured as, selling a home with the MLS and, board of realtors and stuff. So, and you got a whole international buyer element too, right? So people are calling and emailing and such from all around the world. And I saw that as something that you really embraced and you were good at. And that, like, just dealing with business owners all day, every day on a daily basis, I see, you see trends and you see patterns. And for me, I see most entrepreneurs have, at best, two strengths, right? And so I'm talking about the main channels, right? Sales and marketing, managing people, right? Operations, HR, technology, finance, so there's like, most people are only good, if they're lucky, at one thing. Some are good at two things. None of them are good at three things. And like, I felt like for you were great at sales and you were great at marketing. You understood how to like build a brand. And I think that you kind of, I'm sure you at a young age you would change a lot by going back, but I felt like right away that was your strength and you knew that. And that was really neat to see, you growing the business right away and just generating and capitalizing on what, building on what you had already had with that Denison brand. So
so just to add to that though, or to actually take something away from that. So I think marketing, I've got a pretty good like intuition for it, in technology and kind of how to use technology in a way that's meaningful, not just like grab the word and try to like insert it in some mission statement, but like see like how can it make the journey for the customer better. I'm pretty good at that. Horrible at sales though. So, and many businesses, when you first start out, the founder is the sales engine, right? And I quickly found out that I was really, really bad at it. And it was just because, and I think it relates to something else that I think is kind of interesting, which is the idea and the notion that you have to be incredibly passionate about something to succeed, which I think is just a big myth. And it's easy to say that because it's fun to say, and it's cool when you hear it from Steve Jobs at a commencement address, and it's kind of like, get passionate about something and the rest will take care of itself. But in reality, I think there's a lot of people that just are forced to, and for me, so I didn't know much about building boats, I didn't know much about the yachting industry, but I loved marketing. And I just sort of was able to insert that into a vertical that I wasn't passionate in, and it ended up okay. But I think a lot of times there's kids graduating from college that don't know what their passion is yet. And the idea, I love, there's a book called Be So Good That They Can't Ignore You. It's the idea of just making the investments to get really, really good at something, and success can follow even if it's not your thing.
Going back to sales, I noticed, and I think you did this early on as you were building your network of brokers, you're really generating the business to bring the leads in the door, and then you're really delegating and handing them out, which to me, I think as a broker, if I'm going to work for a shop like yours, that's appealing.
Yep.
Because I'm not competing with the owner, but the owner's really on my side. He's trying to get business through the door.
Right.
And maybe you're helping them close, maybe you aren't, but and then you've got a lot of them specializing. Some do trawlers, some do sailboats, some do center consoles, some do mega yachts.
Yep.
And so I thought that was really, visionary on your part to build a business that you're working on it, not really in it. Right.
Yeah.
So growing that way. And so,
but that only happened because I wasn't good at sales. So like when I would get a lead, I would be like, oh man, I just got I did something to do that. And then I would grab it and call the guy or the gal up, and I would be so nervous. My hands would be sweating. He would ask me a question about fuel burn rate, and I didn't know, and I would just fumble it all the time. So it was a net result of me just identifying something I wasn't good at and trying to surround myself with people that were good at it, and that was kind of like the magic.
Which, by the way, is magic that a lot of business owners don't have, I think. And it's actually in my notes here to talk about, what do you think your strengths are, which we've covered. What do you think that your weaknesses are, and how do you address those? How do you manage that? What kind of tactics do you use? Because I think the inclination is for a lot of owners to really ignore that.
Right.
And so I was listening to a podcast with Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you know Alex, and I like him because he doesn't use extra words. He's very direct in his point, but he's doing a seminar and a guy stands up and says, can you take me through your closing framework again? And he goes, yeah, sure. What is your close rate now? He goes, 40%. He goes, that's a phenomenal close rate.
That's insane.
Why do you want to go through my closing framework? Clearly that's a strength. You had one question and you're asking that one. I loved that segment. And so it sounds like, just if you're aware of what your weaknesses are, I think that, that's very sensitive of you to surround yourself with people who are good at that.
Right.
Because there's just no way, like I said earlier, you can be good at everything.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
For sure. And I think when you do identify you're not good at something, and to be honest about, if there's something that's, for me at least, it felt good. I remember because we're in a sales, we have a sales company. That's a sales thing. And I was like, I'm not really good at this. And I remember admitting, I knew it for a while, but I never wanted to admit it to my dad or the other people working there, because I thought it was just going to be we don't want to work with this guy. This guy's running the company, doesn't know what he's doing. But when I did start to verbalize it and admit it, it was so freeing, and it allowed, and that's the cool thing about having good people around you is they'll pick that part up. And so it was like a release. I felt like I was whole again. I don't know.
Do you feel like that was a strength of yours, recruiting and bringing in talented people?
Yeah.
Because you're energetic and charismatic. So I think that's part of getting them inspired. But do you think that was a strength of yours?
Maybe. I don't see myself that way. I think in our industry there's a lot of energetic, charismatic, handsome, type A, and I maybe fit that, but I would get lost in that profile. I think what really helped out was the idea that, again, one day I said, hey guys, I'm not going to ever take a lead ever again, never. And I'm just going to focus on this part of the business. Please come with me. The lead, there's going to be, and what it does too, there's real integrity with the leads. There's no, in our industry, there can be the guy with the name on the door, kind of taking the best ones for himself. And it also let them know that when I woke up in the morning and I came to work, I was there to support them and feed them. And I think it made the recruiting part of it really easy for us. And again, we're not a fit for everybody. Our company is a little different, but for those that do fit, it really was a very cool thing in the recruiting. I don't think I've ever picked up the phone and tried to poach somebody. It's very much people kind of find out about us, and it just happens because of that dynamic. And it was rooted in the acknowledgement that I'm not good at sales, and everything else kind of birthed out of that.
And so one of the things that I think when I think of you is that you're an avid reader.
Yeah.
And you're, and that's a weakness of mine. I read a fair amount, but I go through these gaps where I'm not reading a lot and I'm too distracted. But was that something that was always part of your discipline and your sort of daily habits? Because the thing that I always remember about you is the first time you told me that you run and you listen to books on tape, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
I need to be listening to death metal in order to just get out of bed and put my shoes on. Right. And you're doing it and listening to books on tape for hours on end.
Yeah. No, but so for me, there's a great book called you've heard it and probably read it a bunch of times. Jim Collins is Good to Great.
Yes.
And he talks about characteristics of a great leader auditing all these publicly traded companies. And,
Like level 5 leader or what?
yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the characteristics, by the way, was not reading, but I'll tie into that. One of the characteristics was these people, and I think it might be the only one that I actually have. And I forget what he calls it, but it's something like a healthy form of paranoia. So for me, I'm constantly looking behind me, in front of me, is like looking at our competitors and really trying to figure out how they might take share away from us. So for me, the whole reading thing, and I read almost nothing but nonfiction, is just so I can learn something that will help me as I'm looking behind, to the side of me and in front of me at my competition. I can hopefully pick up on something that'll give me an advantage. And it's like less about the enjoyment of it for me and more this like psychotic, I've got to use that time when I'm running. Because in the early days, I'd be like, why should I go running? I could be working. And for me, it was like a way to justify, doing both in a weird way. It was like a weird efficiency, paranoid, psychopath nature to it. But I do now enjoy it way more. I found out the books can be obviously just so awesome. And it's really helped me out a lot.
Do you ever put books down? Do you like? I have this strange sort of push to finish them, even if I am just like struggling. Like I'm reading a book right now, I won't say, but it's it's definitely a nonfiction, and the initial premise of the book was great, and I think it really helped me, process a few things. But it's just the book now just becomes repeating that same premise over and over and over. I'm like, I probably could just put it down and go use my time more wisely.
So again, I'm a psychopath when it comes to, I don't ever start a book I don't finish. And that's probably a mistake. But like what I will do when it does become like that dry or like repetitive, I'll just put it on like 1.2 or 1.3 speed and just like blitz through it. But it's really interesting. There's like, when I finish it, I feel like I'm now free to go on to the next thing. And if I don't, it like haunts me. I'm like, what if there was something?
That's how I feel. I feel, but I end up, just be real, like I'll go through it slower. I'm not going to read 20 pages. I'll read 10 instead because it's just, so that's tough. But I mean, what would you say, was there a book early on that kind of shaped you or really helped frame and motivated you more than any?
There's a bunch of them. I mean, there's probably 20 that I have that like I'm constantly referencing. One of my favorites was a book by a guy named Tony Hsieh, who had like one of those really horrible, tragic endings to his life, but he started a company called Zappos. And he really, in the book, is called Delivering Happiness. And it's about his journey of starting this shoe company and selling on Amazon. And he really introduced and maybe validated something that I was maybe even a little insecure about, which was letting people, like providing an environment corporately in your company where you can give people freedom to be a little weird and be themselves and like not have to fit into the company's square peg, like really allow, and he was probably the best at that, and just building a culture that let people be themselves, and like the results from that are they speak for themselves. And the other one I love is a book by Adam Grant called Give and Take, and it sort of deconstructs the idea that nice guys finish last. And both of those books are books that really just shapes how we do business.
I love that give and take, that idea, because it ties into, and I read Good to Great probably 20 years ago. And I remember talking about it in grad school. But to me, when I was, growing up and, getting into the business world, I always had this sort of stereotype of a leader or a CEO as being this swashbuckling, like ruthless out, like Dunlap kind of type. But that wasn't what I knew from my dad and my uncle, who, had a great career in the car business, relatively speaking. And I'm like, they were always so humble and they cared about their people so much. And there's tons of stories, of them helping there. They had a band that they played, played for charity and, gave all the proceeds to charity and stuff. And then I read Good to Great, and it was talking about I can't remember if it was a level 4 or the level 5 leader, but it was talking about the humility of these leaders and how they depended on those around them and they gave credit around. And that was so refreshing to me. Because I felt like this stereotype I had in my head, I knew I was not that person. And as perfect or imperfect as I would never be. So I kind of felt like, well, how am I ever going to be an entrepreneur or leader if I'm just not completely cold and ruthless? And come to find out that's not really the way to do it, even though those types, they can be successful.
Right.
you know, in their own right by being, you know, wealthy and famous or what have you, but they're certainly
There
not the
are,
only way.
yeah,
the
there
only
are
road.
outliers, and I think of Steve Jobs. And if you've read his book, you're
Most of
really
it, yeah.
introduced into most of it.
Yeah.
Try and
That was
finish
a
it too.
long book, man.
It was, but you dive into his world a little bit, and you get these accounts of the people around him and his own, and it is really wild how obviously successful he was, but also how cold the driving type.
yeah.
And those are the leaders I think that we exalt, like a Steve
Yeah.
Jobs type, and you miss out, I think, on the hundreds and thousands of other leaders that do it a totally different way. I think of your dad and uncle as great examples that build a business in a very human way. And are they going to be on CNBC tomorrow?
Right.
Probably not. But that
Right.
I think when you take a look at small, medium, even very large companies, there's a lot of great examples in Good to Great. You see a very human, positive, thoughtful, humble prototype that leads great organizations consistently throughout decades. And I think that, and I love what you said, because I think early on I desired to be a Steve Jobs type of a cold,
Right.
and it just didn't fit me well, and I didn't wear those clothes well, and it just like, it was false and not who I was. And I felt like that book gave me freedom to be more myself.
Yeah. Well, it's
That, by the way, that sounds crazy. That sounds horrible. It gave me freedom to be more myself, humble, smart human. I just felt like that was an
sound
ultimate
bad.
humble brag, right?
yeah. No. Well, I mean,
Just
didn't
who I was
sound,
born
didn't
to be
sound
was
bad
amazing.
until you brought it up.
Yeah,
Now I'm
thank
like,
you.
who, you know,
Who's this douchebag?
what a jerk. So recently I got ads on my phone for like 2 years to join Masterclass.
Yeah.
Finally, they gave me a discount, and the first one I watched was Coach K from Duke.
Yep.
And I really love that guy. I don't particularly like basketball a lot.
I got to hear him speak last year.
Did you?
Yeah. He's as amazing. He's just an incredible human being.
He tells a story at the very beginning where he's talking about his last regular season game in his last year, and they're playing their rival North Carolina, and they lose. They lose at home, and he walks off the court and he's so mad. You know, I mean, he's not like throwing stuff because that's not his style, but he's so mad. And then, you know, a few minutes later, he has this epiphany. He's like, then he gets mad at himself. He's like, I'm making this whole thing about me.
Right.
Like that these guys didn't go out and they didn't win for me in my last game. And he was like, that's not how a leader should ever think. And just like the intentionality that he approaches his job on a daily basis, the buy-in that he gets from his players, and he had Shane Battier on Go Heat, and you know, they shared their stories and stuff, and I'm like, it was so refreshing to me, you know, but it made me sad at the same time that the world doesn't have more leaders like that.
Right.
That it doesn't have more, you know, sort of spread the love and get more buy-in. And I think it's harder to do things that way because you have to really be intentional. It's like being a dad to me, right?
Right.
Like you can be there, but like before you know it, my son will be in college next year. Like, was I really intentional as much as I should have been? Like, makes you think, but like that takes time, it takes planning, it takes discipline. So,
and it takes, and all of that is rooted in the "it's not about me" narrative that Coach K talks about.
Right. And he's just one guy, right? In a huge organization, and so he had so many great stories in there, and so I'm glad. And then I turned my dad onto it, and now he's watching them all, and so. You sold Denison Yacht Sales 2 years ago, roughly in March, I think.
Correct.
You know, when did you start? I mean, you're thinking about growing, right? And you're growing, and you're adding more brokers, and you're adding more offices. And I think I read you're roughly 220 as of last year brokers and associates in the business. And are you thinking consciously about growing because of value, or because you feel like you have to, you know, defensively, or you're growing the brand? Like, what's your strategy there? And are you focusing on growth, or are you focusing on value? And, you know, this principally is kind of what I'm looking to understand, what you're thinking there and what the strategy was.
That's a good question. So we historically, going back to that 2001 start to now, even post acquisition, I'm probably more of like a growth minded leader, less of a, like, there's so many different ways to measure like the success of a company, and it could be profit margin, it could be your earnings, it could be your revenue, it could be the number of employees you have, it could be, there's all these different, and the thing that I was always drawn to and most concerned about was growth of revenue. And not to say that was not the best way to look at the success of a company, but that was the thing I always looked at. And for us, it happened very organically. We had one of those kind of up and to the right spurts for a pretty long time, but it was never with the eye of getting acquired or the intention of selling one day. It was just more of the joy of competition and the joy of succeeding and bringing people with you and all that stuff. But we definitely, I looked at it, and our leadership team would look at number of transactions, how many, what was the value? Oh my gosh, we sold $1 billion worth of, and that sounded cool. Like, but it was very much the top level stuff. And I wish I had been looking and spending more time looking at profit margin, earnings, and I was always looking at the other.
So you're growing, you're adding more offices, and obviously you're traveling a lot more.
Right.
Right. And you're married. What year did you get married?
2012.
12. Okay. And so did that change your outlook at all? Like traveling around the world and just meeting so many different people?
A little bit. I mean, so I got married in 12. I met Danny in 2009. We're very much going through that, like, very accelerated. And one of the great things about our marriage, like, she knew what she was getting into.
Yeah, right.
So when and it does require a lot of travel. And the annoying part of that is that my travel always includes these, like, insanely amazing places like Monaco or Cannes. And so it would result in a very often I could imagine a spouse saying, "Must be nice," or "You're leaving me for this." But she very much knew the hard parts of it, and the glamour of Monaco is different for somebody that has to go out there and, you know, sweat it out for 8 days in a row and that whole thing. So I was so blessed that she was very understanding in that, and I don't know if she ever pulled me back from one trip. Not to say it wasn't hard for her, but she was very understanding of that and gave me, like, a lot of freedom to do that and not feel guilty about it.
Did you find any types of, like, maybe cultural sort of, like, limitations in terms of, like, different business practices and customs, you know, growing into different countries that maybe you had to kind of reassess how you did things? Or
maybe a little bit is tempting, because so Europe, and specifically you look at Monaco or maybe London, is the epicenter of a lot of our businesses, big super yacht and charter players. And even an American client can feel kind of seduced by the British accent with the blue blazer and the gold buttons and the Oxford, like, so it is tough when we opened an office in Monaco a few years ago, and as we enter into that world, it is tempting for me to try to be a little more like that. And I probably am on some days trying to be a little more formal or a little bit more sophisticated in ways I'm not naturally. And anytime that I do that, I can immediately tell, and I'm just like, "Oh, stop! You just everybody knows you're just."
It's a temptation.
Yeah, and so I have to be brought back to, that's not who we are as a brand. It's not who I am as a person. And we truly are an American company. The vast majority of our clients are American, but the person leading that for us in Europe is British, and it fits that so the day-to-day operations are very much rooted in the personality and probably prototype of somebody like that. But he also fits our internal culture and brand well. So the expansion into that culturally, we've been successful because we found the right person to do it. And that's not me.
Yeah. So you have, like, sort of market leaders kind of running those specific markets. That's interesting. Is there any different types of, like, did you try anything new that, like, that you would say didn't work, or different channels, or, you know, whether it be
so many things? I mean, just last weekend we had and it was my idea. We had the biggest flop of an event known to man. It was the most embarrassing, idiotic thing we've ever done. It was my idea. We tried to do, like, a simultaneous open house. I thought people would love that.
Yeah.
And we spent a bunch of money, a bunch of time, and we convinced 50, maybe more of our brokers to give up a Saturday and basically throw the flags up all around the country and do an open house in the middle of July or at the end of July, and it was a total disaster. And we're constantly doing things like that. And I think my, like, favorite thing about our team is that we'll do that, we'll examine it, we'll look at it, we'll talk honestly about it, and we'll just laugh about how stupid it was, and then we'll take a few pieces that are worth taking and we'll apply it to something else in the future. But we are doing so many things like that all the time that just don't work. And then once in a while we'll do something really awesome and we get a lot of praise for it.
Yeah.
And luckily people forget about all the dumb things that we've done prior to that.
It's interesting. So, like, over the years, was there any big breakthroughs with your business where you're like, you landed, you know, sold some huge mega yacht or some big advancement, you know?
I mean, I think we were probably one of the first companies that sold a boat north of $20 million from the internet. We're probably one of the first companies that sold a boat over 10 million, $15 million with cryptocurrency. There's like a few of these things that we do that are, and at the same time, like just prior to that event happening, we get a lot of like rolled up eyes of, oh my gosh, here's these people at Denison doing crypto or internet marketing. And then at
That's
some
got to
point,
be great about like vindication.
yeah, I mean,
right?
it feels good, but it's like both of those things are connected to, and this is something that I obsess about, which is like the idea of putting yourself in the shoes of a client and trying to make it really easy for people and safe for people. So like crypto for us, we were early adopters to it, but it wasn't because I'm a crypto guy. It was more of the idea of if people that have cryptocurrency and Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever it is, how can we like solve that problem for them of buying a big yacht and make it easy and not have to stumble through the conversation. So we started talking to companies and internally our closing team, and we tried to figure that out ahead of time. So when we started getting inquiries on the phone or through the website, we knew what we were doing, we were on it. And I think at this point we've sold probably close to 20 or chartered and sold. And so things like that. But
20 million or 20 like units or like
transactions.
Okay,
with
20. Okay,
with
transactions.
three of those being north of 10 million bucks, and a lot under that. But we also I spent way too much time thinking and executing on ideas related to like NFTs that ended up being a total flop, a waste of time. And I look back on that and I'm like, what an idiot. But again, for every 100 NFT stupid things that I do, I get excited about, there's one cool idea that we have and we run with it, and it'll have like big impact on bottom line, big impact on reputational kind of like, so we're a risky, as a company, we're willing to take those risks and walk away with mud on our face and try to wipe it off as fast as we can.
I think it's that kind of risk that got you where you are today, right? I mean, you came into the business as
Maybe.
you know, somewhat of a, you know, you're a guy that's, you know, bringing new ideas to an antiquated business and willing to try new things. And I love that. I mean, we're constantly, you know, doing that in our business, and to trying new ways really just to get in front of people, right? And get in front of people at scale. And, you know, I love that. And if you know, you can define like what your downside is. Like the downside is we lose $10,000 on, you know, we spent on this event. So what?
Right.
Like we can easily define what that risk is. But the upside to a winning idea, especially one that you can do year in and year out, that's like recurring in nature, like is infinite, right?
Totally.
And like, so I love that willingness to take risk and you know, calculated risk in business, like, and so.
And but just to speak to that, my biggest fear early on as we started doing some of these really kind of risky things is I would fear we're going to have a flop of a thing, which we would do, and I would fear that we would lose everybody, clients, employees. And what I found out was people like that are like-minded love it. Even in the midst and the aftermath of a failure, will charge ahead with you. I found people will not. There's examples of this. Luckily for us, we haven't suffered through any moral mistakes, but I feel like the moral slip-ups are harder for people to forgive. The strategic slip-ups are really easy for people to embrace. And so we continue to strategically make mistakes, and people continue to forgive us. And we, again, are once in a while we'll hit a home run, and it'll make up for all those strikeouts.
I mean, I think as long as you're not abandoning your core values, right, and your core competencies, and you're not doing these things because you're distracted or you're bored, or like you're doing because you're trying to grow, right, and you're trying to, like, the world's changing, right? AI's, you know, everybody's talking about that. And before, I remember sitting in a meeting at my dad's dealership, and the GM put an article in front of us, right? It was, and you read through it, it's basically talking about how all the storefronts in the world are going to be boarded up and shaded up, and you're thinking. And you get to the end of the article, right? And it's really kind of like I don't even know what you want to call it, like a little monologue.
Right.
And you're thinking, oh, this guy's talking about the internet. He was talking about the advent of the Sears Roebuck catalog.
Oh, no way.
So it made the point that 50 years prior, the catalog came out. Everybody thought every piece of retail was going to board up. And the reality is that didn't happen. Now, of course, 20 years later, the retail landscape has changed, right? And malls are, you know, really, really suffering. Retail is not gone, but certainly the landscape has changed drastically.
And so then it's through those shifts of, like, whether it's technology or whatever, like those big shifts happen, you make a mistake, and especially if you own up to it, and if you're willing to take those risks as things are moving, you make a mistake and you're willing to be humble about it and real about it and not try to cover it up or not try to act like it was somebody else's fault, people
Yeah.
will stick by it.
Which is what you would find in, you know, a really typical like corporate world, right? And like you've built the culture where it doesn't, you know, and it's refreshing to know that those like worlds and those workplaces can exist because
Delta, did you see what Delta did? They had that big CrowdStrike failure, and they had, and I just got in my email today. I think the VP of Sales, I think his name's Bob Summers, and I love seeing leaders try to apologize, and you'll click on it and you just cringe because you know it's going to be corporate talk. And I found it really refreshing when he just owned up to it. He we made a mistake. We really hated the mistake. We're going to do better. I promise. That kind of realness and authenticity, I think, is something people are craving. And it's not the whole sorry if I offended you or sorry that we didn't meet your expectations. It's like, no, we don't. That's like static, repulsive shit. And it's neat to see people stand up and say, we sucked at that, but we're never going to do it again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. It's like everybody knows what really happened. You might as well, you like let your like apology match that, right? And because you're not, especially in today's day and age with the internet, like everybody knows what's up, right? And Twitter and like the information's out there, and so just in turn, we talked about advancements in the business and in setbacks 6 years ago. You had one of those. And I remember that phone call, and you know, you had an employee and a friend in your business embezzle a lot of money.
Yeah.
And not just a lot of money, but from an escrow account. And I have to ask, like, how did that affected you? How did you find out? Like, what was that moment like? Like, take us there, and how did you process that?
Let me finish this off real quick.
I hear you.
Felt better. Oh God.
It's
Woodford. What is it? Okay.
It's Woodford Reserve. It's my good stuff.
A little
shelf.
hair just pop out right here. It just came out of my chest.
I used to pull teeth to this stuff, you know, years ago.
Yeah. Back. I think it was about 6, 7, maybe a little longer.
I read
than that.
18.
Maybe,
so well, at least
so
that's when
18 was when it became public.
Okay. Right.
It was a lot of like figuring out what was going on. And all of this, by the way, I'm going to tell you a horrible story. Hopefully I can unfold this pretty quickly. And there were some bad things that happened to us and to me. Ultimately, it was all my fault. So 10 years ago was when it started. Mm-hmm. And when I say started, we had a very good friend and somebody that was very impactful in the business. So this is like a hard story for me to tell, and it's easy to villainize this guy. Mm-hmm. But I really credit him for being, when I talked about surrounding yourself with good people, and people that help bring the company to places I could have never have done by myself. He was an excellent VP of sales. He was awesome at the human cultural thing. He was in my wedding, very good friend. And he went through a period of time where he made a bunch of horrible mistakes. And this wasn't one of them, but this was only one of them. But he started taking money from our company. And just did like, it was almost like, do you remember the movie Office Space?
Yeah.
Where it was like
fractions of a penny.
Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't quite fractions of a penny, but it wasn't huge amounts of money that I would notice. Mm-hmm. And it actually, and this is probably the saddest part of it for me, and I'm not justifying this is all my fault, but my wife and I had recently had a baby. And that baby spent a ton of time in the NICU. So I was there, and you've been to a NICU. It's like one of those places. And
I was in that NICU.
You were in that NICU. And it was, when you're in a NICU, it's like nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Nothing. C.S. Lewis talks about like thin spaces where you feel like whatever membrane is separating us from heaven, like that. It feels like one of those sacred thin places. And we just living in and out of a hospital for a period of 4 or 5 months. And I took my eyes off of stuff I shouldn't have taken my eyes off of, and that's when it started. And it continued on for about 1.5 years. So around that time, basically gave this friend and our VP keys to the kingdom with a lot of different accounts, and he started to get bolder with the fractions of a penny, not what, right. But bigger and bigger. And at one point, we found out that he took a lot of money, like 7 digits. And the hardest part about it was that it was money that came out of escrow, which is the scariest part. Even now, me saying this, and I guess the more time that goes by, like he started at 10 years and we found out maybe 8 years ago, like it feels a little safer for me to talk about, but it was so scary, and I thought nobody would ever trust ever again to put money and deposit it into our escrow account because I just didn't have my eyes on it. So the hard part for us was all this money missing, and it wasn't money that I had in my account.
Right.
It was money that was entrusted to me or the company and we didn't have that money. And it was very much like, are we going to survive this? I called close friends. You were one of them. And what do I do? How do I get through this? And it's all about people, right? Like I had a few people that really believed in the company, believed in me, and we were able to make that right. So we hold up the whole account, and we pushed through, but it was a very scary, hard to wake up, hard to go to sleep kind of a period of my life.
And so, yeah, I just can't imagine like the moment that you like realize that.
Well, we
like,
knew money. So for a long time, it was such a big amount of money, and we couldn't find. I thought there was maybe one instance, or maybe we had a cyber, like something happened, but there was such small amounts that got bigger. But through a course of a long period of time, I thought maybe there was a clerical, like I didn't know what it was, and he was actually helping us find out what was going on, knowing that he was and so it was like confusing. So there was things that he may have been doing to kind of cloud and it was just difficult, hard. There's somebody, she actually helps lead the company right now. Her name is Kathy Azuma. It was a moment that she brought me into her office and she said, I know what happened and I know how he did it. I said, who's he? And so that moment was very freeing. It felt horrible, but it was also like, now I know.
Yeah.
But before I was like, I don't know what's the problem. So it was like the knowing of it was good and crushing at the same time. And it was horrible.
I think one of the more remarkable parts of that story is that when I saw it on the news, I mean, obviously I knew it had happened, but I wasn't badgering you, pestering you to talk more about it, and it's a private affair or whatever. But the part on the news where he gets sentenced and then you hugged him and forgave him like publicly, that totally like blew me away.
Yeah, I didn't. It was weird. It was a Palm Beach Post reporter had commented on that, and she actually called me. She was in the courtroom. I guess there's some of these Palm Beach Post reporters. That's what they do. They cover things like this, and I didn't know she was there. But I remember the judge came down, and he was going to prison. Keep in mind, this guy. I can tell you right now, I love him. Like and I don't talk to him very often. I just reconnected with him recently, but like he's got all kinds of problems that are facing him, like jail time. He's got daughters, and I didn't know what to do, but I knew he was going to jail and his life was about to be really horrible. And I don't know. I just wanted him to know, like, you're going to be okay. Like, we're good. And it was interesting that she picked up on that, and she actually mentioned that. So she called me up, and she said, "Hey, it's the first time I've ever seen somebody do that, and why did that happen?" And I just said, "Because I love them, and that's what you're supposed to hug people you love when they go through hard times." But I don't know. It was definitely a weird day, but. I can't believe you found that. Like that, I hope one day when Rivers, my son, is Googling, like the whole thing, he's gonna hear see that, and maybe kind of glean something from that. You know?
It is like a whole separate like book diatribe we could go on right now, because I think you probably know. And I was trying to think of the book. I was talking to Dan, our producer, earlier, but like Malcolm Gladwell wrote on this, right?
Yeah.
Like the divergence between people who have suffered tragedies, and he's talking about tragedies like, you know, murders and stuff. Like this is a really bad thing that happened, but obviously this is a different level, and people have chose to forgive, and people have chose to really seek vengeance.
Yep.
And vengeance through justice, you know, and legal channels. But like the difference between their lives after, and it makes you like realize it's. I mean, obviously the forgiveness it's a virtue, right? But like it's also for you. Like to hang on to that anger is like a poison, and
totally.
But that doesn't make it any easier. I wouldn't think. Like I've never been in your shoes, but I just, that was like, in a good way. I was like, that's so Bob Denison, you know, to say, you know what, like I'm not gonna just hang on to this like anger my whole life and be pissed off and an angry guy. And so, you know, that was.
So I referenced being in the NICU, and I wasn't planning on sharing this, but in the NICU, what they do with babies because they're constantly trying to figure out, are you healthy? What's the blood oxygen level? All that. They're just constantly under surveillance, and they're constantly pricking them. Right? It's just nonstop. And so there's a thing, I forget what it's called, but it's a very common thing where babies, when you prick them, like they're going to associate touch with pain. So you go to hug your son or daughter as a little baby, and there will be an immediate like rejection of like a recoiling. And so the nurses would tell us it's not anything weird. This is very normal. And so our daughter, her name was June, never pulled back. And so like I remember very much, even now, like when we hire somebody for senior management stuff, like it would be such a shame. It would be so like somewhere dark to go down the idea of like, is that person going to do to me what was done to me in the past? And like the thing that I learned from June in the NICU was like, you don't recoil. And it could be a girlfriend maybe, or a spouse cheated on you, or a business partner screwed you, or a neighbor. Like I think the hardest thing about that is developing some kind of wound that turns into a recoiling effect from future people that try to help you or love you. And it like so for me that hug was like so natural and real, and it was rooted in. And even now I don't want to ever be the person that's suspicious of somebody trying to screw, because it screws up everything, right? To assume the worst in people, and she taught us to like assume and see the best.
Well, that's an amazing lesson. I'm sure you've got a few more of those sort of in the vault in that experience, and with June. So I want to fast forward to OneWater, and you sell the business in March of 22, and I remember that phone call too. Thankfully, I've gotten a lot of phone calls from you over the years, and I appreciate being somebody that you counsel with on those types of things. And interested to hear more about that process and how that came to be, and just was it organic? Did you had interactions with them before? Or
I guess the beginning of that story would be like the moment I found out that COVID was a thing that was going to like just change the way that our business would be run. And it was, I don't know for you, but for me, like the moment I realized, oh my gosh, my life is over. I'm going to go bankrupt, and I'm going to go live under a bridge.
It wasn't good.
Yeah, it was when I was watching the Heat game, and there was an announcement about, I think there was another NBA game that was canceled mid, like while they were like, no, we're not doing this. NBA season postponed. We're watching that going down, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. And as you know, things weren't that horrible in terms of guys like me trying to sell boats, and a lot of other places of like that were horrible for a lot of people.
My phone didn't ring for 6 months.
Yeah,
like it was really difficult to process.
It's this weird thing where you have this horrible human event of people dying at insane numbers, and many people that we know died. And at the same time, you come out of that maybe 60 days later. For me, it's that NBA moment. 60 days later, for us, like the gates opened up, like the good gates. It was just everybody wanted to own a boat, social distancing. You wanted to be on the water, go do stuff with family, and it just became this like accelerator for our business. And you referenced it before. We're pretty good at the technology thing, so we were able to pivot really quickly and really crush it. We just crushed it. Just as I'm willing to sound like an idiot saying that, like we owned that period of time, and it was really great. Our team was awesome. We pivoted quickly. We were doing things before anybody in our space was, and we really benefited from a lot of seeds that we planted years prior. So anyway, doing great. Numbers were awesome. And then somebody, a really good guy in the industry who was acquired by OneWater prior, came to see me and said, hey, would you ever be interested in selling the business? I said, not really. It's a family business, third generation. It's just weird for me. Don't really do that. Plus, we're not really prepared. We've never gone to market. You were one of the only people I think I talked to even prior to that about like what would that even look like if I did want to sell one day, but not really. Like I didn't know much about it. You were like the only, I didn't even know how to even have that conversation. And this guy was really nice, and I respected him, and he came, made a few passes, and then finally, he's kind of like, let's have a conversation. So I did, and it sounded, I think the first thing for me that sounded appealing was how like good and normal they were. So OneWater is a publicly traded company. Yeah. My perception of publicly traded companies was very much suit and tie. Yeah. All I'm going to hear about are
Earnings
earnings,
and
profit margin, quarter, and I just didn't
expectations
want to
and
get sucked into that. And I have CNBC on in the background, so I kind of
right.
know enough to be like, ah. And when I first talked to them, they were so human and nice and easy to talk to, and they knew the business, and they were just good, decent people. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Let me just have another conversation. Maybe I'll learn something. And we had a few more of those conversations, and it ended up getting more serious. And again, we weren't prepared for it. We didn't have. We just didn't. We weren't going to market, so we didn't have anything. Like it was like, and so when
audited financials. And,
so when it got to the point of like, what does your business look like? It was almost kind of like, I'm going to say it wasn't this, but it was like, here's our QuickBooks login, just go take a look.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad, but it was like, we just weren't prepared. So we started having more conversations, and we got along, and I think they wanted to diversify a little bit. They weren't really into brokerage and super yacht services, sales charter. And then I had a partner who's a little bit older than not a little bit, but he's older than I am. And he was one of the people that bailed me out of the situation where we needed funding. And he had really got us to the point where we could even be a company again.
Yeah.
And he was continues to be a mentor to me and somebody that I love a great deal. And so he being a little bit older, I say a little bit older because I'm trying to be polite, but he's older there. He's like, he's old. Not that old, but he really had a different mission. Like he wanted to, at some point in the next 5 years, look for an exit. And I felt like it was a good thing for him, maybe a good thing for me, and we decided to sell. And it was in 2022, about 2.5 years ago, and it is, it's been good. They've been great people, even post sale, and been really good to us.
So that process, how did you manage the process of telling your family, telling your dad and your brother who had been with you so long, your younger brother Eddie, and your dad who's also been in the business for many years, is selling boats, selling marinas, walk me through, was that an emotional process for them?
Yeah, that was the first call I made, obviously, was to my parents, and then to my uncles, and my brother, and we were just, it was the, guess what's happening? Like, I want to, and I don't even know if I want to do this without you. Like, are you? Right. And they knew it. Like, they knew the hard parts of it. And I think we're in the COVID thing kind of around that time. We're still in the, who did I hear? Was it Elon? Somebody just recently described, and I think they grabbed it from somebody else, this idea of being an entrepreneur is like looking into the infinite abyss and chewing glass, right? It's just a crazy, psychotic thing. And they payroll, and like my parents, my uncles, my brother, they knew the hard parts that I've had to suffer through, and we've all had to and so I think for them, they got it, and they were very gracious to me. And I know, because it occurred to me at the time, third generation, my grandparents are no longer with us. Yeah. Are they rolling in their graves? Are they looking on in some way where they're disappointed in me, where they're upset, where they're like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. And maybe they had some of those thoughts too of, are you abandoning this thing? But they withheld every comment or every concern like that. And it was all supportive and all really good and kind and gracious, which I needed badly, because I did feel like, and I still struggle with it a little bit now, like what I talked about my son Rivers, and he's got 3 little sisters, and we just had another boy. Like, are they going to be upset at me for, that? And so the generational thing, I think, weighs heavier for somebody in making that decision, but it still was the right one, I think, to this day, and especially looking at the best interest of my partner and employees and brokers. It's been a good match, but it was very much phone call followed up with a let's talk about it at the house. And they were so nice to me about it, and they didn't have to be. They could have thrown so much guilt my way.
No, obviously that's great to hear. Getting into the details of the actual transaction, I know deals can be very complicated, and once you sign a letter of intent, it's far from over, right? I mean, that's kind of like when a lot of the fun really begins, for lack of a better phrase. But how did you handle key employees and confidentiality? I know most of the people I deal with, to some degree, are very sensitive about, the buyers want the key employees to stay, right? They're not buying you because you have, you know, an office lease. They want the people. It's the people that really makes the business, right?
Yep.
Like, how did you handle that and letting the employees know, or the key employee, you know, what was that process like, and how did you like sort of manage that?
That's a really good question. So our key employees, we're a small business, and it was a group of 4 or 5 people new, and we really benefit from our company being a group of people, not just that, but everybody underneath. There's a very high level of confidentiality because of the people that we're serving, right? There's not a lot of, you know.
I guess we were selling a boat to.
Right. We've sold a few boats to some people. You call it TMZ, it'd be an exciting thing, and link to our website. Like, there's some companies that do that stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, most companies don't. We don't. So the culture is very. There's a lot of trust, a lot of like sensitive information that's shared and never leaked. And so for me, as I entered into that and I told our key employees, like, this is going down, I felt good about that part because of 20 something years of nothing ever leaking.
Right.
So I felt really good about it. And then when it did become, oh my gosh, this is really happening, and then we had to tell people, and when I say we, it was Danny and I, my wife Danny, called, and Ben, who helps me run the company, called every broker. They're just like, hey, this is that night. We called every single person and told them. And then the next, we didn't hit everybody because it was getting into like 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Right.
And then we had a company-wide meeting the next day, and I said, here's what's happening. Here's how it's going to affect you. Here's why we did it. Here's why I think it's good. Here's the parts of it I'm not so totally certain of, but I think we'll get through it. I'm staying, and I hope everybody here stays. And it was probably it was best case scenario. Like, everybody stuck around. We had a few people drop off, maybe start their own company, do some different stuff, but really the core team hung in there and continues to hang in there. And not just because they're hanging in there for Bob, but because the company's still well run. The people that bought us are good people, and they've steered a lot of the broader big decisions really well over the last few years.
And so your team knew before, like, it happened?
The night before.
Oh, wow.
The night before, I tried to call everybody. And then the morning of is when we told everybody on a Zoom call. And then a few hours after that, there was a press release sent out, and then our little world of yachting knew at that point.
What was your comfort level with, like, your confidence level that everybody was gonna stay?
I wasn't totally sure. Yeah, but I felt pretty good about it because our company's different, and we're not for everybody, but like the people that are there really belong, and they feel like they belong in an industry. And it's tough because our industry, it's easy to have a culture of like having some pretense and trying to act like you're, you get the nice watch and the nice gun. Like, our company's not like that. So the people that are there tend to love being there for the reasons of, authenticity, and you can feel like you're. So I was hoping that would continue, and I was also hoping, I wasn't sure, would OneWater allow us to just keep being who we are, and they did. And I think that's really a big reason why most people stuck around.
I find often it seems like almost an irrational fear of companies changing hands.
Yeah.
To where, because I think people hear, they hear that companies change hands and buyers are going to come in and change everything up, which really is counterintuitive to preserving value, right? Because especially a business like yours, like, you sell boats, but the value in your business is the people that sell the boats. Right. Like, you don't own the boats, you're just selling them for other people, right? And like, it seems elementary to even say that, but like, that's people just seem to irrationally think, oh my gosh, somebody else is coming in, when no, like, they're coming to buy essentially you. Right. They want you to continue your service, and if anything, a bigger company coming in oftentimes has better benefits and things that that are perks to employees that they love, and they're like, oh, I get a 401k now, like, I get a better 100%. Health plan, and the buyers are almost never going to lower salaries because they know people will just usually leave if that happens. So it's like, it's going to be at least the same or better, but just handling that it's sounds easier than it is oftentimes, just because of that as emotions.
And it's the fear of the unknown.
Right.
Like Bob says, these
100%.
are cool people. Are they really good people? And I think for the acquirer, one of the great things that they did, they immediately came down. And I think there's the fear of the unknown is at that point resolved. And they're good, normal people. Like, by the way, they're not like, wasn't a bunch of suits coming in saying, hey, why did you order an extra yellow sharpener or an extra yellow highlighter? Like, what? It was very normal. And those people, and you know some of them, but like there's a guy named Scott Cunningham that runs OneWater. He's a senior VP that really drives a lot of, he comes down and he is one of the most authentic, pure, human, let's get together and figure stuff out, the hard things that he is. And so you meet Scott and you meet some of those people and you realize this isn't somebody that's a talking head on CNBC that's going to crush the company culture to get an extra fraction of a point in margin, but they have a long view on stuff. And I think the fact that they implemented and deployed people in their organization to come down and hang out with us was it really helped that part of it.
Yeah, that's great. Did you have in the buyer at OneWater, were they okay with not talking to these employees prior to the transaction closing?
Yeah, they were. That surprised me. It was one of my worries that they were going to want to talk to everybody ahead of time, and I would have let them because I have a lot of confidence in our people. But I wasn't sure of like how is this? How are they going to talk to them? And they talked to some key employees, but it wasn't like a broad, we need to talk to everybody kind of a thing.
Oh, so they talked to a few people?
Yeah, they talked to a few people that were involved in the deal, but nobody else outside the deal.
Usually the CFO has to know, right? Like, because they're the ones spitting out, like, why do you want bank statements for 2 years?
So our accounting team and our finance, like, they knew, they were in the know, and we decided early on to really bring them into the conversation and not be weird about it. Because when it's, hey, we need last 24 months, they're going to say,
we're getting a business appraisal,
right?
And then you close and you're like, okay, you lied to me, right? Like, that's also like probably not the best way to start.
Yeah, and those people tend to be the smartest people in the org, and you can't BS your way through a conversation like that. And again, it all goes back to being lucky with just having really good people that you can trust that are smart. And there's a lot of people in those departments.
You're still a young guy, so I mean, I wonder, like, do you think that they knew there would be a sale at some point?
I think it caught everybody.
In the near future.
It caught everybody off guard.
Yeah.
And there was there was a few people. So I talk about making those phone calls. There was a few, the first phone calls I made were to the most important people in the company. And I'm not talking about important people because they're the highest producers but important people to me that have been there the longest, that are my closest friends, and they felt betrayed. Like they felt, there was tears that were shed. There was, how could you do this? There was, what the is
because
going
you
on?
sold?
Yeah.
Just, that's it? Because, like, how could you sell?
Like there was very much a betrayal, like we're in this together. It was a common theme in those conversations. Some people were like, cool, awesome, how is this going to affect me? But there was a lot of like, wait, I thought this was our company. What did you do? You didn't tell me, like, and those people stuck around. And it was very much here's why I did it. I had a lot of vulnerable, like, here's me and here's what was in the logic of, and they felt they were upset. And after talking to me, they still were upset, but they felt like more understanding and sympathetic. And I think that only comes from the very honest, pure, here's why I did it, here's who they are, and thank you, because you're right, this wouldn't have happened without you. And I think that was one of the reasons I thought I was going to be able to make all, whatever that is, 200 and something, I think at that point it was 180 something phone calls, and we got up to 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we just couldn't get there because those calls took longer than I thought. And I think the one-on-one part of it was worth it. It was a hell of a night, but it was worth it. It wasn't like 10 people on the call at the same time. It was a very personal thing, and I think that, again, was consistent with kind of who we are and all that stuff.
So I think you kind of alluded to it before, but your grandfather, 1948, you said?
Yeah.
Like, he probably told my granddad to go home.
Right.
Yeah. We were just in Asheville this weekend, walking across the street, and somebody yells out the window, "Go home!"
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I guess we're not allowed to come here anymore.
Yeah,
We've been going there for 40 years or whatever. But like, if he was standing here now, not about the sale part, but just about like what you built with DYS being third generation, and obviously it seems like you would never have gotten in this line of work if it weren't for him. Like, what do you think?
100%.
And your grandmother was very involved too, right?
Totally.
Gertrude?
Yeah.
Right.
Gertrude, we called her Shushi, very involved. She was just a big driver of the business, and I still don't know. I still think about it a lot. My parents and uncles kind of, I think, tell me what I want to hear, maybe.
But he sold. Like, obviously he was in his later years, but like
much later years, and I don't know. I'm haunted by it a little bit. Like I have dreams about it, and I have had a few dreams where we're kind of like, I don't know, in the same room.
Yeah.
And there's not really a conversation, but like it comes up a lot for me. It's probably more her than him, but I don't know. And I weighed it, and I think if I was to have a conversation with him about it, it would be the very similar conversation that I had with my parents of like, here's why I'm doing it. I hope you trust me on this. Like, I feel kind of like, and my little brother Eddie is very much in the industry too. And it's like, here's what we're thinking. Here's why we did it. I don't know if I'm making the right decision, but I hope you know I'm being thoughtful about it. It's not flippant. It's not just for the money. It's not just for like, here's why. And I hope the fact that he and she, my grandmother and grandfather, know that that it wasn't flippant, that it was like, I hope they would at least give me a little bit of grace there, but I don't know. But I think they would understand. I hope they would.
I mean, I didn't meet your grandparents, but I would like to think that in the grand scheme of things, they'd be pretty proud of you, and just carrying on that legacy, and especially in the way that you did, is a pretty amazing and such a rare thing.
Yeah, and I hope Rivers and Nora, Summer, Scout, and this fifth baby we had that we don't have a name for yet, I hope that they get into the industry, and I hope they carry the torch. It might be in a different way. Maybe the company that I hope they work at Denison and the whole thing, but if they don't, they don't. And it's, and you know, the older you get, when you look at your own son and daughter, it's like, and it sounds so cliche, you hate to say it, but it's like, you want them to do well, you want them to hit their stride, you want them to be happy, not necessarily do the thing that you did,
Yeah.
or your grandparents did, right?
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely true, and you just want them to be happy, good people, and
Yeah.
but it is also like, you'd be lying if you didn't say like it's kind of cool when they do some of the things that you did,
Totally.
right? And
Just
it's,
seeing Huntley down there looking at the cars,
Yeah.
and you kind of, there's maybe a generational itch to like, that
It is
draws you to
crazy.
that. It's hard to define it, but, so I'm hoping one of the girls, maybe one of the boys has that, and it'd be neat. And it's also a little selfish too, because like, I want to have this glass of really good bourbon when I'm older with my daughter or son and talk about the business, right?
You know, I just think it's like, that's a great thing as long as you can find something in common with them. And I think our generation is probably done with, that's one thing we've done well, is just like find a way to relate to our kids.
Yeah.
And maybe even the generation before. I mean, I feel like our parents were like to be seen and not heard. You know what I mean? And our generation, maybe the pendulum is even like swung too far the other way in a lot of cases.
Right.
That we're like, we're trying too hard to make our kids happy. But for me, it's like, if I can find something that I relate to, you know, my son, it's definitely cars and sports. It's super easy. With my daughter, she loves music. She's musically talented. I am not musically talented, but I love music, and so we can definitely connect on that level. And like, if you just have that one thing, you know, and like,
And I think generationally before, it was a little bit like you would assume, and maybe it was that has to be the business, or
Yeah.
it has to be and I think as we, like, it can be many things.
It could be
it's
like
not
just-
the
yeah.
the cars or the boats. It could be that anything that brings you together a little bit over a glass of whatever. It's a
100%. And I see a lot of cases, because I am not a entrepreneur like you that has run and operated and sold a lot of companies, but I've dealt with, and I deal with entrepreneurs every single day. So I have that sort of empirical
right.
insight into
And you get
that.
to see it from a totally different angle.
Right.
Yeah.
In numbers, right? In
Right.
numbers. And you see families to where the expectation is the kid takes it over, and the kid's like, I'm not really into this.
Right.
And it's a sensitive situation, but I want to tell the owner, I'm like, hey, just be happy that your kid is telling you that.
Right.
And not saying that, hey, I'm entitled, this is my business, my
Right.
name's on the wall. Like, go sell it.
Yep.
And go, you know, enjoy the money and the wealth that you created, and find something else to bond over other than the business, because you can't fake it in business, right? Like, you know, it's not all of us may absolutely love what we do, but if you enjoy what you do, and you're, you know, there's always some things in business you don't like, right? I'm not going
Right.
to pick up the phone and call this customer's not happy, but if you enjoy it 80% of the time, like, that's a blessing.
Yep.
And so you don't want your kid coming into the business and hating every day they go to work, and expecting them to create value, because that's like, it's never
Right.
going to happen.
And for me, the beginning of my story was that conversation with my parents where they were kind of
Yeah.
manipulating me into but there was enough trust and love there that I like knew what was going on, and I knew that they'd be by my side. I wouldn't be alone. And it was like, I felt good about it, even though it
wasn't like an ultimatum, hopefully. It was like, come
Right.
on over. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
It was
work
somewhere
out.
in between an
Yeah, yeah.
ultimatum and that. But there was enough love and trust there that it made sense, and I felt good about it. I think they felt good about it. And yeah, the rest kind of took care of itself.
I call that family.
Yeah.
it's just there's some complexity there, but
Yeah.
and in the grand scheme of things, that's good,
Yeah.
right? So, moving into more fun stuff beyond business, but you mentioned in an interview last year that you have a healthy fear of sharks.
I do. Yeah.
So you're also one, if I remember,
No,
because
but it's an unhealthy. Like a healthy fear of sharks is not cannonballing into a great white birthing mating session.
it's unhealthy. So like it's irrational. Like you see a shark on TV, you're scared.
No. It's worse than that. And I'm not joking. Right now, I will not go swimming in my pool at night by myself. Because I think, or I'll psych myself out that a shark is going to come through the pool light and eat me alive.
Could happen.
Yeah, definitely. There's a
You can't say
percent
it
of
can't.
right.
You
It's
can't say the
possible.
chance is zero.
Right.
Right.
So it's an irrational fear of sharks, and but I will let you know, a few months ago, I jumped in the water with a shark in the Bahamas for the first time in my life ever, and it was.
What kind of shark are we talking though?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that.
Yeah.
It was a nurse shark.
This details matter.
It was a tiger shark. No, it was a nurse shark. Yeah.
It does. So, what I was gonna like. So I remember one of our conversations from childhood.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have to remind you, we played little league baseball together.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Is this where you're going to tell the story about me crying on the mound?
No, I don't even. If you cried in the mound, I don't remember. I don't hold those stories up. But I remember you were big with your brothers on dares.
Yeah.
Like you guys would dare each other, and your the disparity between your older brother and younger brothers, like a number of years, right?
Yeah.
And so, like there was a lot of concocting of foods and mayonnaise and
Yeah.
things like that have scarred you
Yeah.
for life, which is that sounds to me like a normal household with 3 boys.
Yeah.
But so I thought, like, if there was like a pile of money on that table,
Yeah.
to go do like a great white cage dive with me,
100%. Yeah.
what would the pile of money have to look like? You think?
In a cage,
I mean, you're doing okay now, but maybe 5 years ago,
Right.
Pile of money.
$80, let's do it. I would say the cage thing, I actually kind of want to do it. I don't know if I would have the guts to do it when the moment presented itself. The cage, have you seen those videos of the sharks going into the cage?
Yeah, sure.
Horrifying. Without a cage, there's no amount of money. With a cage, it would have to be a few $100,000.
Like,
is that a good?
100,000 with a cage. Okay.
By the way, I think I would rather go in the cage with sharks around me than I would swim 200 yards off of the sand at Fort Lauderdale Beach and back.
What about like standing on the transom of the boat with a great white like circling?
Just standing there?
Yeah, just in the bare
rough
transom.
seas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would rather be in the cage.
Yeah.
So there's a,
It's probably smart.
yeah, I can, just as you're describing it, I can feel some physical reaction to that, and it's not good.
So you and I, yeah, I mean, so you and I, just so you know,
But I would like to just reference this because
please.
I don't understand how anybody could feel comfortable swimming with any fish, a barracuda, shark, nothing, because they don't give like a facial expression, so you don't know if it's pissed off or not.
Yeah.
Like with a dog, you're kind of like, oh, that thing's in a good mood.
Yeah, the tail's
You don't
up
know
in
if
the air
they're
like he's mad.
hungry,
Yeah.
they're angry, their wife cheated on them, they had whatever it is, whatever put them in this aggressive, I'm going to eat you mood. You don't know what's going on in that shark's mind, which is why I just would rather be in the back of the boat.
Yeah, there's
having
no
one of
warning
these.
signs. There's no
Yeah,
like,
there's nothing.
it's like poker face.
Right, yeah.
So I didn't know if you knew this, but there's no specific word for the fear of manatees. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
The closest thing I could find is megalhydrothalassalophobia, which is just a general fear of creatures underwater.
Okay.
So if you want to
I
use
think I
that
have
word,
that,
you can
yes.
use that.
Yeah, I'm gonna update my LinkedIn bio immediately.
Yeah. So megalhydrothalassalophobia.
Okay.
So in the same interview last year, you said you'd never seen a whale in real life. Have we?
I still have never seen a whale, and I've been on the water maybe, I want to say 5,000 times. I don't know how many thousands. I've never seen a whale. Have you seen a whale?
So just last summer, for the first time,
Really?
I took my family and we went off the coast of Monterey
Okay.
and saw humpback whales, and that was pretty cool. So
Did you go out on the water to go see them?
yeah.
So I've never done that, but that still counts, by the way. I don't want to take
Why
that away
wouldn't it
from you.
count?
I don't wanna-
I had to go 5 miles. I had to
No, but
work
like,
for that.
do you have friends that like go out like fishing and they're like, yeah, we saw a whale breach?
So
That's even, both are incredible. And there's something about seeing a whale, I'm sure you felt it, where you feel the smallness of yourself in a way that you can't feel otherwise.
it was
Like
pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully you'll see it someday.
I really want to.
I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're a history buff. I think
Yep.
you alluded to that before, but I'd be interested to hear like top 3 autobiographies or people that you would want to, historical figures,
Yeah.
and why.
That's
who are
really
the top
good.
3. Not like a big history guy,
Yeah.
but I
So I love,
aspire
there's
to
a
do.
guy, I mean, there's so many, but and I'm probably just going to recollect a few of the recent books that I read just because it's top of mind. But have you heard the story about the dude that started Duty Free?
No,
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
the no taxing at
Yeah,
airports or what have you.
incredible.
And this is a historical figure.
I mean, I think it is. If you haven't heard of him, you need to go read
Oh, I
read the
mean,
book about him. But he started this billion-dollar company with a few friends, sold the company to LVMH, I think is what it was, and took his billions of dollars and gave it all away and didn't let anybody know. Just billions of dollars, just gave it all away. So like somebody like that, and I struggle with that because if I give somebody $10, I'd like a name on a building, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that kind of is just in me. Not that I have that kind of money to do that, but like that appeals to me, right? The recognition and maybe put a logo on the back of the t-shirt. That guy quietly made the world an incredibly better place without telling anybody. So like I would love to have a coffee with that guy. I love just anything about Churchill. I love reading books about Churchill, and I love just even the post-war stuff, becoming a painter, and like I love Churchill for who, and he would love this. Like I would love to sit down with him and hang out with him. And then there's any of the founding fathers. Like I love my all my kids have the same middle name, Winslow, because
Yeah.
they were related to the one of the dudes that came over on the Mayflower. So like that whole thing of like the men and women that came over here in the beginning, like that stuff to me is hyper cool.
Just
So
like looking for a better life and
yeah, and just the
willing to risk
danger.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the people that died, the kids that died, the men and women that died in the pursuit of this thing that we now get to sip on this and talk
Yeah.
about selling businesses, but in this great like all that happened because of hard things that they did. I'd love to talk to any one of those men or women.
I think you mentioned in another interview I saw Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah,
Was that one?
huge.
Was
Like
he the one that did basically all the national parks in the U.S. like
national,
designated?
but he also not only that, but he was like a man that lived that out. Like he did the crazy, like manly. I'm gonna go down the Amazon River for a while with my boy, and we're gonna risk our lives just to go adventure and traverse and go kill buffalo with the Indian. Like he did that stuff not to be electable or likable, but just because he wanted to experience life in its richest, purest form. Like he would go. And I need to learn from that because I like air conditioning way
Yeah.
too much. I don't even like camping.
And you
Like,
have 5 kids. So
Yeah.
traveling is
so, but like that stuff, and I think he had a bunch of kids too. But that whole idea of like going out and making yourself uncomfortable to go do cool, like with nature and
Yeah.
animals, and I don't do that well, and I think he did, and I would love to learn from that.
no, that's great. I think I did read the book on Lewis and Clark, and it blew my
Yeah.
mind. Like the book ends with them by the Missouri River, I think
Yeah.
in St. Louis, and they're burying themselves like basically in mud to sleep because the mosquitoes
Yep.
are just destroying them.
Right.
And I thought the comforts that we have now, like I get bit by a mosquito in my backyard,
Right.
outside in air conditioning, I'm pissed for like an hour.
Right. Yeah.
And they're covering themselves in mud in the
Right.
middle of the summer to avoid like losing blood.
And I think there was a certain, and you hear Lewis and Clark, and you maybe reference that a little bit when you just hear the name, but like the hard, just hundreds of nights and days that they had of being scared of just a million different things and just pushing through it. And the joy of accomplishing something like that, I'll never know. Like,
Yeah.
sold my business, that's pretty cool. We can talk about it, but like that kind of thing, like, and I feel like my desire for comfort and air conditioning and Wi-Fi robs me of like
Yeah.
some joy that I'm never going to experience because I didn't get through something hard like that.
Yeah.
So Lewis and Clark would be on my list too.
It's all about like I think we just become accustomed to things that would be so hard for us to reverse. Like you mentioned air conditioning. Obviously, that's such a massive thing. But
Right.
so kind of like closing out, I think you notice we're here at Rebel Motors,
Yep.
and we've got walls full of classic cars and exotic cars, and including a '69 Mustang that my dad and I bought that we're going to restore. That I will not be showing you right now.
Is that car here?
Yeah, it's here.
No way.
They
Okay.
I don't know why they tucked it conveniently away in the corner. It
Okay.
has no motor.
Yeah.
But every other car in here is more beautiful and more fun. Is there, or maybe I should ask you about boats, is there a car that if you could pick right now, like for fun, purposes or nostalgic purposes.
You're going to think I'm making this up, but I have been looking into lately. So I'm not like a car buff, but I love cars. They're awesome, but I don't dream of cars. I don't want to save up for a car. It's just, there's just different things in my life that excite me. But I do love, and it's probably the nostalgic thing, I love the old Grand Wagoneer with the wood panel on the side. And I think it's a really cool car aesthetically.
For sure.
I think I have a lot of memories in the car. And I have been recently thinking about maybe bringing that into our family and kind of
the old Jeeps, like with the wood paneling on the side, right?
With the carpet and the whole just everything about it brings back to me. And I think that's what, when you look at cars like this, I think there's obviously something beautiful and artistic and like hard to pin down exactly what's so appealing about it, but you see it and you love it. But I think the real love and emotion is attached to a car that is attached to something in your life that you had some experience with friends or a girl or like that whole thing, that period of time in your life, it makes it like resurrects that. So for me, it would be the Grand Wagoneer. So, you're not going to see any Grand Wagoneers back here, though.
I mean, you don't know. We'll take a walk after this. But I will tell you, it's so true about the nostalgia. And obviously, when you're a kid, you don't have that really so much. And there was just like a day in my life that I woke up and I was like, I want to buy a Mustang, because I still remember in like 1992 in high school chumming around Fort Lauderdale, and Phil Kurgis let me drive his 93 Mustang. And I always knew what a Mustang was. And he was like, oh, he's eating something. We stopped and grabbed a bite. He's like, I'm going to eat this real quick. Can you drive? And it was a stick shift, and I knew how to drive stick. And we went down Las Olas Boulevard, and the roar of this like throaty V8, I was like, oh my God, I'm in love. And I'll never forget that. And the next year I made, honor roll or whatever. My dad bought me a 93 Mustang, and that was like my first love, of course. And I will never forget that. I can still hear the engine in my ear. So I reached out to my dad a couple years ago and I said, let's buy, his first car was a 64.5 Mustang, which was the first model. And so let's find an old Mustang and restore it. And we'll make it look original, but we'll add modern comforts like AC, but it'll have all the original cues to it. And he's like, let's do it. So I looked for months and months and months. I hired a freelancer online to just search all the websites, and we finally found a 69 fastback, which is also called a sports roof, and that the back kind of slants rather than going down.
Was it here
on
locally,
eBay.
Or?
I found it in North Dakota.
No kidding.
And so we brought it here, we had it blasted, and now it's waiting, like, it's full reconstruct. It's here.
Wow.
Sitting on the rack over there. So that's going to be, and my son is salivating over. He's 17. He can't wait for it to be done, but that's going to be something where it's done. It's going to be like a mutual.
Yeah, we're talking about hanging out with your boy and having one of like that generational continuity. Like I think of all of our old friends, and I think of the cars they had, like Chad and the Camaro. I think of Guma with the Jeep, and just the different, like it's really part of us. And that's the unique thing about cars or boats, is it like in some way represents us a little bit. The Grand Wagoneer, it's a really emotional kind of like, it's kind of like hearing a song, and it brings back memories. When you see a car, it brings that back.
And I saw my dad and my uncle chumming around with classic cars all the time when I was a kid, and I was just like, I don't get it. The thing's old, there's no power steering and stuff. And then one day you wake up as an adult, you're like, I get it. Like that was my childhood, that noise, that smell of the interior, the memories of, like you said, going to pick up some girl you had a crush on or whatever. And you're like, I need to get one of those. So hopefully it fulfills like my like ideology of it.
I think it will. I can't wait to go see it.
Well, man, this has been fun.
Yeah, me too.
Really enjoyed it. I could probably keep going for a few hours, but I really appreciate you coming, and it's amazing hearing your story and the journey, and 20 years. It seems like a blink in one way, and in others,
totally.
It's been a lot longer.
It's pretty scary how fast it's going.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
Enjoyed it. I'm dry.
How are we on time? That was way too long, right?
No, that was not too long. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do this.
Ah, shit.
Yeah, right there.
Man, it feels like it's midnight.